Okay, birth and physical development during the first 3 years, Chapter 4. I do want to warn you that I've actually spliced 2 pieces together on this. I had recorded part of the chapter a couple of years back, so I'm just going to do up till that part, and then I'll splice them and make them kind of one presentation. I should take it. Shaken baby syndrome is very problematic. We read about it in the paper real often. Really, mostly what I have to say here is we need to educate people about this sort of thing. We need to help people with anger management problems. It really doesn't take very much to damage an infant. My general recommendation is if you are frustrated or upset or angry, don't touch your babies. Small children, that sort of thing, increases chances that something unfortunate will occur. Sorry, I thought I had this one cut down. Okay, childbirth customs used to be a female-only thing. Midwives were used overall. Death rates were high, not necessarily because it was midwives, but because the medical science really wasn't far enough along to save the moms or the babies when there were problems. Also, infections were real high. It was just a real hard time for people. So things have gotten better, but along with it, we have really medicalized pregnancy and delivery, treating it more as a disease or medical condition needing treatment than a natural thing that's gone on for as long as people have been people. So there is a shift back to try to humanize the system again so that, it's a natural thing to have happening. So home births are a possibility. Some of y'all watched that video on that. Some are definitely against it. Some are definitely for it. I think it's something that each person needs to research and decide on their own. There are midwives available in Lubbock. Also, birthing centers are more frequent now, either as part of the hospital or as a different building with the hospital, because the hospital is full of sick people and germs, and having healthy women deliver healthy babies in that kind of environment is really not best. So having something a little bit different is better. Birthing centers are more like a hotel, allow a lot more opportunities than the old hospitals used to. Birth process, parturition. This is a process that begins about 2 weeks prior to delivery that gets the body ready for delivery. Get Braxton Hicks contractions. These are also called false labor at times. That is the uterus starting to crank back up. It's been very loose and stretchable for the last 9 months. Well, it's time for it to get ready to do its job and to push that baby out. Cervix becomes flexible. It has to, because it's got to go from less than a centimeter to about 10 centimeters in the birthing process. So it's got to loosen up some. This has to do with rising estrogen levels, which have been lowered for the pregnancy. There are 3 stages of vaginal birth. First stage is the longest, typically 12 to 14 hours for the first child. This is where the infant is pushing against, actually this is where the uterus is pushing the infant against the cervix. As the head, hopefully the head, pushes against the cervix, it dilates until finally the infant can start to, or the fetus can start to pass through on its way to becoming an infant. This is, again, typical for the first child. Generally, subsequent deliveries are shorter, but no woman has two pregnancies or deliveries the same way, and no two women each share the same aspects either. So each one will be different. Second is the toughest. It's about an hour, 1 to 2 hours. Contractions are much stronger and closer together. They get to about 2 minutes apart. The baby's head moves through the birth canal. This, again, is the shortest, most important, most dangerous trip that most of us will have as just a part of our life. Stage 2 ends with the baby coming through, leaving the mom's body. Third stage, anywhere from 10 minutes to 60 minutes, a placenta and umbilical cord are expelled from the mother. They'll keep an eye on her, make sure that her bleeding stops, or at least cuts down to a reasonable amount. Just make her comfortable, keep an eye on things. Cesarean deliveries, a lot of people think we have too many of them. Really the most highest percentage in the civilized world. There are reasons for cesarean deliveries that I think any medical person would see as valid, and then there are some that maybe aren't so much. Sometimes if the baby labor progresses too slowly, it'll be problematic. Generally, after 24 hours after the water breaks, they want the baby out. If it's not out within 24 hours, they induce. If the induction, and whatever the term is, doesn't work, they may decide that they have to go in cesarean. Or if the hard labor lasts a long, long time, mom and her uterus might just wear out, and then they may decide to take the baby. Again, we talked about it in class. I'm not sure that convenience is one of the best ways or reasons to decide on cesarean. But that's something that doctors and moms need to decide on. I did want to go ahead and mention that one of the other reasons that cesareans may be larger, besides malpractice, fears, high-risk pregnancies, the ones listed here, is that sometimes the fetal monitor will indicate that the infant is stressed, and that may encourage some unnecessary C-sections. Another one that's not mentioned here is breech presentation. If the baby's not head down, sometimes the decision may be made to go ahead and do a cesarean rather than try to turn the infant. Unmedicated delivery, natural childbirth, and really I'm not going to make any real difference or differentiation between natural childbirth and prepared childbirth. I consider them to be fairly similar. Lamaze really just, as far as I'm concerned, added the coach to natural childbirth. I think that the Lamaze classes are well worth taking. I think it helps people know what to expect, gives the coach some things to do that might help out through the delivery. I think it's a good way to go. Doulas are similar to midwives except that they don't have the same level of expertise. What they're there for is as a person who has gone through a delivery, delivered their own child, and has gotten special training to help the mom and the coach, if the coach is there, through the birthing process. And generally, unlike midwives, doulas are there, stay with the mother, expectant mother, and throughout the process. Medicated deliveries. This is, again, like I said in class, I think this is up to the woman to decide as far as it goes. If you want to deal with that ring of fire and face it like a real woman, well, more power to you. I'm glad I don't have to do something like that. Local regional anesthesias, everything. Generally, local is going to be used if there's an episiotomy to block the pain. The regionals, epidurals, generally with Demerol, though they have a new medication, I understand. Epidurals have a couple of problems in the past, and even at times now. If you take an epidural, then you're going to be in bed because you're not going to be able to move your lower body, not going to be able to feel your lower body. They do now have what's called a walking epidural, and that does allow the woman to get up. We discussed it in class. Being up on your feet allows gravity to help in the birthing process. Gravity sucks, so you might as well be using that suction to help get the baby out. The other thing to think about is that the anesthesia, whatever you put in your body, is going to go into the infant. So if you take a shot of Demerol, you're giving the fetus a shot of Demerol also. Relaxing analgesic, just an over-the-counter medication, like as you understand what might be problematic with it, so check with your doctor. A leaking spinal cord really sucks. Okay, average neonate should be about 20 inches long, about 7.5 pounds. They do have fontanelles, the soft plates of the head. This is to allow the head to shape itself as it comes through the birth canal. And that's one of the big difference between C-section and vaginal births. C-sections, the babies tend to have very nice round heads. With vaginal births, it tends to look more like a cone head. Also, you'll see lanugo, fuzzy prenatal hair. This holds the vernix caseosa, which is a protection that coats the fetus's skin in utero. It is one of the reasons they look so funky when they come out. It does protects it from infection and also from corrosive amniotic fluid. Body systems, breathing, we all need air. Anoxia is having oxygen cut off. Hypoxia is having not getting enough oxygen. These can lead to birth traumas, which can be damaging to the infant. Anoxia can be caused for any reason. Breech birth, the umbilical cord wrapped around the neck. Hypoxia can occur from either injury, or it can be caused by being preemie and the lungs not being able to handle the atmosphere. Meconium is basically baby poop. If it is, meconium is evident in the water when it breaks, the amniotic fluid, that is an indication that the fetus may be distressed and may need help. Neonatal jaundice, yellowing of skin and eyeballs, it occurs very frequently. About half of the infants has to do with the fact that the infant can't handle food. Even mother's milk at this stage needs a little bit of time. Generally, all you really need to do is soak it in some sunshine. When you notice the eyes getting yellow, if that doesn't do the trick, they have lamps, special lamps that you can take home or go to use, and that will help the baby break up the uric acid. APGAR scale. APGAR is a physical scale looking at making sure that the heart, the lungs are working well, and that there's general strong activity in an infant. It's a 0 to 10 scale. A healthy baby is considered 8 to 10. They're in good shape. If it's between 4 and 7, fairly often they will want to do another APGAR after 20 minutes. And we'll see this particularly in infants, or a change in infants that have been medicated during the delivery with an epidural. So it takes them a little while longer to work it out of the system and to become normal. If the score is below 4, the baby is considered in arrest and needs immediate resuscitation. Brazelton also looks at the physical abilities or activities of an infant, but also takes in the social environment. That's because we are social creatures, and infants start reacting to social stimulation like voices very, very quickly. Voices and touch are very important to a newborn infant. Screening can help us detect correctable or treatable disorders. Really, PKU is not correctable, neither is, these are not correctable, but they can be dealt with. PKU, the infant is unable to process certain proteins in certain foods. If their diet is not adjusted, then the proteins build up as poisons in the system and will eventually cause mental retardation. But if caught early at birth, then the foods, the diet can be changed so that these proteins are not present, and the infant can grow up to be normal, whatever that might be. Hypothyroidism is underactivity of the thyroid. It's linked to obesity. It's also linked to goiters. Generally, medication, lifelong medication is needed for this, but getting it started early keeps any damage to a minimum. You can look at that if you want to. Complications, birth trauma. Birth trauma can occur from a number of reasons. Anoxia is one of them. We talked about it, having the oxygen cut off. Also infections, if mom has active genital herpes or has HIV/AIDS, the infant can pick up these up. I'm not sure that HIV will cause harm immediately. Genital herpes tends to, but HIV has some pretty devastating long-term effects. It can also be caused by infections. One of the problems with C-sections is sometimes when they cut that belly and that uterus, they also cut the infant. Also, mechanical injuries caused by forceps or suction devices used to get the baby out if its head's too big. These can lead scarring, neural damage, and even death at times. Post-maturity, 2 weeks, more than 2 weeks past the due date. Prematurity, more than 3 weeks before the due date. Low birth weight can be correlated with prematurity, but also it can be what's called normal gestation, and because of lack of nutritional intake by the mother and transfer to the infant, eating disorders that the mom might have, or multiple births, multiple pregnancy, twins or such, these stay the regular amount of time, normal amount of time, 40 weeks, but are still low birth weight. Low birth weight, weighing less than 5.5 pounds. Let me go ahead and add that if everybody in the family is real small and historically have had small babies, then it's probably not a major issue. Smaller people tend to weigh less. talk to your doctor about it and tell them about your family history. So 2 pounds, more than 2 pounds underweight. Very low birth weight is less than 3.5 pounds, so that's more than 4 pounds below the norm. This is a problem in many countries, but when you look at developed countries such as Europe, parts of Asia, Australia, the United States, the United States has real high numbers as far as premature low birth weight babies. It has an impact on our infant death rates also. So it is the number 2 cause of death in the United States after birth defects. Some risk factors: underage or overage. Under 17, over about 35 is going to increase the chances. Undereducated and poor, which tends to go along with underage. Poor nutrition tends to go along with being uneducated and poor. Smoking and drinking. Stress, well, these do all tend to kind of work together. If they don't know what they're doing and they're pregnant and they don't have a job and aren't going to school and don't have lots of family support, then the stress is going to be there. Probably behaviors also. Education would be a wonderful thing to cut this. High blood pressure, fairly often if the mom has high blood pressure, they may have to give her bed rest or even take the baby early to save her life. What we can do for prematurity, we're doing better and better at keeping preemies alive and healthy. But again, their systems are not able to deal with the outside world. So their stomach, intestines can't deal with the food. So intravenous feeding to avoid those problems. Surfactant is a chemical that promotes the maturation of the lining of the lungs. If it's a high-risk pregnancy and premature birth or low birth weight is expected, they can give the surfactant to the mom and she will deliver it to the infants through their placenta and umbilical cord, thus allowing the infants to be born with more mature lungs. If it's a sudden thing, then the chemical surfactant can be given directly to the infants to help get their lungs mature faster. But it's better for them to be mature when they come out, if possible. Isolate gives a controlled environment like an incubator, has higher oxygen very often, helps cut down on the number of germs that the infant is exposed to, just kind of a safety device. Kangaroo care, we talked about it pretty extensively in class. It's taking at-risk infants, whether premature or whatever reason they're at risk, and stimulating them gently and consistently. You're trying to stimulate that pituitary gland and the other parts of their brain to convince them that they are loved and cared for and that they have a chance to survive. So lots of skin stimulation, lots of rocking, kind of like they're still inside the mom, lots of talking, feeding. Generally feeding is a little bit real often, kind of like a baby bird, but these things tend to make it more likely that an infant will overcome the problems of prematurity and be healthier. Long-term outcomes, not real positive: neurological and cognitive impairment, which feeds into lower academic achievement, which also feeds into social, behavioral, and attention problems. So we're going to have a lot of preemies are going to end up in special ed at some level or another, and it's also with lower cognitive impairments and other things. It's a little bit more likely that they're going to end up in the justice system, maybe spend a lot of time in prison. Post-maturity, 40 weeks or more. Here, the placenta really can't deliver enough nutrition or oxygen to maintain the growing fetus, and the fetus is getting bigger, and the bigger it gets, the harder it is to get out of the womb without going C-section. So at 42 weeks, they're probably going to want to either induce or go C-section, get the baby out of there. Stillbirth, about all I care about on this one is it's really an indication of improvements at keeping premature births alive. When I first started working, if I'm not mistaken, the viability date of a fetus was about 25 weeks. That was the time when about 50% of the fetuses who were born, infants at that point, were going to die, and half of them were going to survive. Now we've backed that off by 5 weeks, so we are having much more premature and much younger premature infants surviving, much smaller. Overcoming birth complications, higher family SES, having money helps a whole hell of a lot. You can afford to hire people to come stimulate and stuff and help out and such. Quality early environment is a nice thing. Again, much easier if you have money. Educational daycare, even just having educational daycare in the area is going to be impacted by the socioeconomic status of the area. So you're going to find a lot more quality educational daycare in some parts of town than you are in others. Educating the parents should be one of the big things. Again, if they already have money, if they know about quality early environment and education, then they probably are educated themselves about what their infant needs. But if they're not, then they need to be educated. Protective factors, excuse me, these are the things that help some children get by all the negative risk factors, and many do. Just like many who have everything never make a real life for themselves, many who have very little or seem to have everything going against them when they're growing up do well and are successful in life. So individual traits, sociability, being able to interact with people, being able to connect with them, being likable, those sorts of things are pretty important. The child who has those things tends to get more positive attention than a child who doesn't. Intelligence impacts the chances of success at school, so that it can be very important. At least one supportive adult in a child's life. Generally, we tend to assume that that's going to be some family member, mom, dad, brothers, somebody, but it's not. They're not always available. So that's where other mentors, teachers, preachers, Sunday school teachers, Boy Scout, Girl Scout leaders, big brothers, big sisters, those are opportunities for those people to come in and make a real difference in a child's life. Giving the child opportunities to be successful at things and getting recognition for those successes. We all want to have some sense of control and meaning in our lives. Why are we here? Hopefully there is some sense of I'm here because I'm important, or I may do wonderful things, something there that tells the child that continuing to live and to work and to sustain effort is a worthwhile thing. Here's some numbers on death during infancy. Again, we're way high compared to most of the developed world, and a lot of it has to do with preemies. Primary causes, preterm delivery is a biggie. Sepsis, which is infection or pneumonia because the lungs are too underdeveloped to survive. Asphyxia at birth, anoxia. Birth defects are number one in the United States, with preterm is number two, or low birth weight. Okay, SID, sudden infant death syndrome. Stop. Okay, we're going to finish up chapter 4 real quick, just quick as I can. I'm about to leave town. Okay, death during infancy. Sorry to have to go here. The infant mortality rate is the proportion of live babies that die in the first year of life. Here we have most of the world's population, or many of the countries. Japan here is 3.3 infant deaths per year, 1,000 live births per year. Let's see here, we've got Switzerland at 4.4. Whoops, sorry about that, folks. Here we have the United States at 6.8, a little bit more than twice what Japan has, just a little bit in front of Israel. About 2/3 of them are neonatal, that's babies that die within the first month of age. Causes of death, birth defects is a major cause of deaths, low birth weight, premature, which is included in low birth weight. This is definitely higher in minorities than it is in whites. Sudden infant death syndrome. This affects over 2,500 infants per year, mostly 2 to 4 months of age. African American male, low birth weight, young mothers, single mothers, poor mothers, mothers who have no prenatal care, mothers who are ill during their pregnancy, who smoke, use drugs, who have babies less than a year apart, and dads who are young and smoke. These are all risk factors in sudden infant death syndrome. Used to be called crib death. It is sudden death of an infant under 1 year of age. The cause of death is unexplained. There may be some underlying biological defect. It may also be that the baby is just too premature, so it may be not a defect, just of a lack of maturation. Things that may be happening here is a neurological instability that just causes the baby to quit breathing, or the heart to just quit beating. The part of the brain that controls that maybe just doesn't do it effectively. It could be that they're hard to arouse, and so they get their faces onto into a place where they can't breathe and they suffocate. Or if they are aroused and they are preemies and are unable to control their neck muscles and lift their head or roll their head, this also may contribute to the situation. What they did seem to find is, at least in one study, that not allowing them to sleep on their stomach, to keep them swaddled and on their backs, reduced SIDS by 70%. So why? Well, I'm not sure, but if it works, go for it. Okay, immunizations. About 85% of all children are vaccinated today. I think there are some waivers for religious purposes, but for most part, if your kids go to public school, they have to be vaccinated. Some areas do better with vaccinations than others. There a while back when we were living in New Mexico, people in northern New Mexico were not getting their kids vaccinated. It's a fairly traditional and long-time Hispanic group up there. Our population up there, they've been there since a lot of them since the 1700s. They kind of have their own ways. but they weren't getting their kids vaccinated, and they had a very sharp increase in whooping cough. So they were having kids very sick and kids dying because they weren't being vaccinated. We had vaccinations are important. There are some risks involved in vaccinations. Anytime you get something like that, it can cause problems. They are very rare. They used to give the DPT shot, diphtheria, pertussis, which is whooping cough, and tetanus, in one shot, and that did cause some severe reactions in some infants. They now give that shot as a series of 3, and so some of those have been changed. But it's still really important to go ahead and have your child immunized according to the schedule. Talk to your doctor about it. There has been there's been a long-term urban myth or unvalidated claim that there was a connection between vaccines and autism, but the particular chemical that was in those vaccines that people were saying caused the autism was taken out of the vaccines, and autism rates have not gone down. So there doesn't seem to be any connection between vaccines and any kind of common problem. Now this demonstrates that cephalocaudal and proximodistal growth that we talked about in class. If you look at this, the head and the torso mature much faster than the limbs and the feet and hands. And that is, it works that way throughout childhood and into adolescence. Adolescence changes a little bit, but we'll talk about that in adolescence. Again, if you notice, the head and the body are very, very large compared to the limbs. And slowly the limbs grow to fit the body. Here's a general growth rates. If you take your kids to the doctor, they'll go ahead and show this. It's one of those quantitative change things. Breastfeeding. I recommend it. Breast milk is what we were evolved to eat. It has lots of benefits. It's more digestible than cow's milk. It seems to reduce allergic reactions. It boosts the immune system, so it minimizes a number of infections. Since it is more digestible, it's your child's baby's less likely to get colicky and have digestive problems. Maybe might reduce the risk of SIDS. Children seem to have better cognitive performances if they are breastfed, and the recommendation is at least 12 months. Some push for even longer. I have known people who breastfed to up to 3 or 4 years. As far as a cultural thing, we don't do that, but other cultures do, so I'm not going to say that that's a bad thing. I think as much as you can give to as many benefits as you can give to your infant is better. Overall, breast milk just is a very positive thing for growing. It also is a good thing for bonding and attachment between the mother and the infant. And what nursing releases oxytocin in the nursing mom, which is a feel-good hormone, and so it's definitely worthwhile on that level too. Bottle feeding is acceptable. If you do use formula, it should be iron fortified. Sometimes it is necessary for whatever reason. Some women do not choose or cannot nurse. So bottle feeding is definitely acceptable. It doesn't give a lot of the immune system and health benefits, but as far as the bonding and such, it does occur and shouldn't be a major problem. In fact, that's how many fathers or partners bond with their children, even though they can't nurse. Again, here shows how quickly the brain grows in utero and after birth. A real quick tour of the brain. The brain is divided in, this is the cortex, the cerebral cortex. It's divided into lobes. The frontal lobe is here in front. That is where we make our decisions. It's where we plan. It's where movement, fluidity of movement occurs. If you damage this, you change a person's personality. Emotional control is here. Here's the parietal lobe. It has to do with motor function and sensory integration. The motor and sensory cortexes are here right together, so those interact. The temporal lobe has to do with hearing and language abilities. The occipital lobe right here has to do with vision. And the cerebellum has to do with coordinating the two sides of the brain, because the brain is divided into two hemispheres, and they have to deals with coordination of movement. We're not going to really get into this. We do a chapter on brain in general psychology, and if you go to Tech, you can take a course in neuropsychology. So I'm not going to really get into this part. I will point out the corpus callosum here. This is the part of the brain that connects the two hemispheres and allows them to communicate. Pituitary gland has to do with growth. These areas have to do with automatic functions, such as your heartbeat, your breathing, digestion, that sort of thing. I think we're going to... we're not going to get into this one. Most of what we do is learned. However, we are born with some reflexes, and they seem to have evolved as survival benefits, protective behaviors. They can be postural, which is reactions to changes in posture or balance, or locomotor, which resemble later appearing voluntary movements. These are things like walking and swimming reflexes. I can't remember, is the next one? Yeah, no. Here we go. Just take a quick glance at these. They have to do with startle reflexes, things like if a baby feels like they're falling, they will throw their arms and their legs out and try to have as much surface area as possible. This may be because if they were falling through the trees or something, this gave them more opportunity to grasp something. It gave them more opportunity to encounter limbs or something that might break their fall. This ties in to the grasping reflex. If you stick if a baby was falling and a stick came within its grasp, it would grab the stick and hang on to it. If you rub their face, their cheek, they will turn towards that and start to suck. If you put something in their mouth, they suck. If you turn their face to the right, then their right arm will come out straight and their left arm will curl up in what's called a fencer's pose, and that seems to help with nursing. Okay, every time you learn something, your brain changes. It changes both structurally, in that you produce new neurons, and you also produce new dendrite connections between neurons, and it also changes chemically in that you change the level of neurotransmitters in your brain as you learn new things. This ability to change is called plasticity. Things that threaten plasticity are sensory impoverishment, which is just not stimulating the infant on some level. That's why I say it's very important to give them plenty of different sensory stimulating experiences for all 5 senses. Malnutrition also impacts the brain's ability to grow. That's why it's very important for infants and children to get plenty of nutrition and proper nutrition. If you do a little bit of starving when you're older, it may impact you, but not like it does when you're young. It's harder to damage the brain than it is to prevent it from growing. But anything you can do to enrich the life and then the sensory experience will help. As far as it goes, babies feel touch more than we do. They have the same number of sensory cells in their skin as we do, but they are very, very much closer together because the package is much smaller. If you've got 100 different receptors in your hand, and the baby does too, compare how close that 100 would have to be in the baby's hand compared to yours. Smell and taste do begin in the womb. In fact, babies will react to what moms eat. Newborns prefer sweet tastes to bitter tastes, so they demonstrate preferences. Oops, went too far. Babies are, well, here, let's see what this is. Yeah. Okay, so they are able to smell immediately, and very, very quickly they learn to smell their mother. They also, well, we'll talk about that. They're also able to hear before birth. It's quite interesting. My son was born recognizing the theme song to Jeopardy, because we used to sit and watch it all the time before he was born, and after he was born, anytime the Jeopardy theme came on, he stopped whatever he was doing and paid attention to it. When we talk about reading, I'll be telling you to read to the belly. Pick a story that you really, really love, a child story, and read it to the baby. Read it to the baby repeatedly, once a day, and when the baby is born, that baby will recognize that story. If you don't believe me, give it a shot. Again, they do show that they hear prenatally and show a preference for new sounds after they're born. The sense of sight is the one that is the most primitive, the least developed. It is about 2,500 at birth, which means that they are legally blind, but it reaches 20/20 by about 6 months. So when they're newborn and for the first few weeks and months, you're going to have to hold them pretty close to you before they'll be able to see you and recognize you. But again, babies show a preference for the people that they know and love, and particularly mom, pretty early. Here's some milestones. Really not going to cover those, but if you've got a baby, this will kind of give you an idea. Okay, the visual cliff, that was handled in that video, so I'm not going to deal with that. Ecological theory of perception just says that we learn to perceive and to interact with our environment by experience. Our culture's real into motor development. You just continuously can hear people talking about how early their child learned to sit up, how early they learned to crawl, how early they learned to walk. We are into that independence. They're not all that way. Not all cultures are that way. Some cultures, if there's lots of things that can hurt your baby out in the environment, fairly often you don't want them to crawl away or to be very independent, at least until they're old enough to recognize dangers. So some people aren't into quick development. Okay, sorry for the quick run, or the run through, but I'm calling it done. Have a good one.